Dawna Kaufmann is a widely read and respected true crime journalist who's reported on hundreds of high-profile cases of homicide as well as missing person cases. Her work has been published in such esteemed publications as Cosmopolitan, the Los Angeles Times, and many other newspapers, including the Globe, the Star, and as well as the National Enquirer. On top of her true crime writing career, Ms. Kaufmann has also written for film and television, including Saturday Night Live, Into the Night, and The Chevy Chase Show, amongst others. Dawna's written 2 previous true crime books with Dr. Cyril H. Wecht, MD, JD, the latest being Final Exams, which deals with 4 very different cases that Dr. Wecht worked on in his capacity as a forensic pathology expert. Dr. Wecht is a recognized expert in forensic medicine and pathology and considered the foremost authority on the assassinations of both President John F. Kennedy and his brother, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. Dr. Wecht has dealt with many high-profile cases that include many celebrity deaths: Elvis Presley, the O.J. Simpson case, Gene Harrison, JonBenet Ramsey, amongst others. Dr. Wecht has also performed forensic pathology, testified, and done in-depth studies of these cases and revealed his experiences in dealing with many such high-profile crimes in previous books such as Grave Secrets, Who Killed JonBenet Ramsey, and Cause of Death, and quite another number of other publications. He has appeared on many different television shows, including 60 Minutes, Geraldo at Large, The Dr. Phil Show, and many others. Now Dr. Wecht and Dawna Kaufmann have teamed up again to present 4 different cases in a book titled Final Exams. These 2 professional crime specialists give an in-depth picture of each crime. The amount of time spent giving a full account of the victims, families, and the crime leave the reader feeling a sense of rage, compassion, surprise, and sadness. The Guardian Liberty Voice has the honor of providing an exclusive interview with these 2 true crime luminaries whose latest work, Final Exams, is available now via Ann Rule Presents. First of all, I'd like to thank you 2 both formally for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk to us here at the Guardian Liberty Voice.
Well, thank you. We're delighted to be here, Mr. Smith.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Michael. We are a fan of Guardian Liberty Voice and a very exciting website.
Fantastic. Thank you for saying so. This is you guys' first collaboration for Ann Rule Presents. But you've worked together before, Final Exams. You wrote From Crime Scene to Courtroom in 2011 and A Question of Murder in 2009. Now, you both first got to know each other on the O.J. Simpson case. You've made a great team in your prior collaborations and in this most recent one. What is it that keeps you 2 coming back to work together?
Well, Dr. Wecht, I think this is where you can talk about how beautiful I am and talented. And he's laughing. You see?
Yeah.
You see?
Well, it's like what the song, Michael, the second time around. My first publication marriages. So I was looking. I'm a serial writer, and Dawna now has been the newest edition and definitely the best. She is excellent. And really, the reason that I came to work with Dawna after we met and discussed this collaboration was because she is just outstanding in her work. She is unbelievably diligent. I guess both of us have an obsessive-compulsive component to our personality, which fits in. We don't allow things to slip or to just lie within the realm of conjecture. Dawna follows through in a very detailed fashion. She is also very fair and reasonable, and she tries to get different sides. It isn't that she doesn't form strong opinions. She does, and once in a while we may indeed disagree in terms of what we think about a particular issue or person or a case, but we always try to make sure that every aspect is covered. I know that I can depend upon her. And then, of course, her basic writing skills. That obviously is the bottom line. That is the foundation of everything upon which all of these other attributes that I referred to are constructed.
Fantastic. I've got to agree. I think you guys make a wonderful team, absolutely brilliant team. Dawna, you got anything to add to that?
Oh, I sure do, because Dr. Wecht, who's, as you said, both a medical doctor and a lawyer, the specialty being forensic pathology, or he's a medical detective. And when somebody dies, the body talks to him and he figures out what happened. And his expertise can send someone to death row or get them out of prison if they've been falsely convicted. And he works on the most exciting cases. He has 56,000 cases in his files. So I couldn't pick a more expert, passionate person to partner with, and I have the joy of being able to decide which are the cases that we're going to focus on. This is our third book. Our fourth is in the making soon, but our third book now is 4 different cases, and we pick those that are very almost cinematic. They have Dr. Wecht works sometimes for the prosecution, sometimes for the defense, but he doesn't shade his testimony to please any lawyer, and that's what's so exciting about him. He's so iconoclastic and so independent, and so the breadth of the cases, some are suicides, some are homicides, most are homicides, that we write about anyway, and the twists and turns. I always say that people who read fiction should try nonfiction, because with true crime, you are really getting the absolute most mind-boggling cases you can imagine, and you end up saying, how in the world did that happen? Well, we go through all the steps.
That is so true. Truth is really stranger than fiction. People use it a lot as a cliche, but it's so true. Going ahead, secondly, I've read several of your books on true crime. Again, realizing that I'd read some quite a few years ago. But it seems like you both have the same goal in mind. You don't just recount the crime and the circumstances surrounding it and the way in which it was solved. You both focus on the victims' surviving relatives and the partners that have been left behind. This is something you obviously both really believe in. Not a lot of other true crime writers seem to catch this. Why do you think they miss the importance of this in their coverage?
Well, if I can say, I think Ann Rule is somebody that I learned that from, who she always cared and cares about the victims' families. They drive her to find out what happened. And Dr. Wecht also responds well to family members and who want to have answers. Not in our books per se, but in other cases, because I still write a lot for various magazines, and when I have an interesting case, I'll go to Dr. Wecht and say, what do you think happened here? And one I'll just throw out really quickly is Angie Dickinson's daughter committed suicide. And I was talking to her, Angie, and the daughter was, she thought she was autistic or had Asperger's for many years.
Yeah.
And she was an adult. I think the daughter was maybe late 30s or something. And a very smart girl, very smart, but just sensitive, ultra-sensitive person. And it was a heartbreak for Angie. But when Dr. Wecht looked at the autopsy report, his viewpoint was this girl was such an achiever because she had such brain damage given the nature of her birth, that it's amazing that she lasted as long as she did with it and achieved all that she did. So even though there was heartbreak in Angie Dickinson's part, she was really delighted and surprised to learn this about her daughter that never would have been told if she had just read the autopsy report. She wouldn't have gotten that. So it takes somebody like Dr. Wecht to interpret.
I try to look at every case in terms of the human being. In fact, I just did an interview with a high school girl today. Students are always writing, and I try to respond and be gracious and ask them to call me on a weekend and devote some time. And she asked a question which I'm frequently asking, how do you do this work? How do you handle it? What impact has it made on your life? Doesn't it do something to you to see all these tragic, violent deaths and so on? And I told her that I try to think of everybody as a human being, his, her, family, a background. How did things wind up this particular way? Is there something that could have happened? And this, of course, is true for natural deaths. I did an autopsy yesterday on a 53-year-old guy who just had one bad coronary It was enough to make him drop dead before his father, whom he was working with at their home, called at 9/11. And I thought to myself, my God, if this guy had some premonitory warnings, signs and symptoms, and I don't know whether he did or not. I don't have that history background at this time.
Right.
That he was a perfect candidate for stents, for a CABG, a coronary artery bypass graft, and so on. And he could have been alive maybe for 30, 40 more years. His father is already 30 years older than he. Or a 1-month-old baby that I did also just yesterday, a chubby, a beautiful baby, put down to bed and dead. And as far as I can see, this is going to be another SIDS case, sudden infant death syndrome.
Oh, that's too bad.
Well, this baby was put down prone. Not supposed to do that. It's not criminal negligence. And I hesitate to say even it's negligence. Some parents are not aware of the fact that the incidence of SIDS is much lower. It's not eliminated, but it's much lower when a baby is put to bed on her back, and they should not be put down face. So I thought about that. My God, look at this beautiful, beautiful chubby baby who might be alive if he had been put to bed on his back. So these are just two examples of natural deaths that make me wonder and think and be sensitive. And then I just testified in a murder case recently that resulted in a first-degree murder case, and I think about the circumstances and which way it could have gone and the people involved and so on. So as Dawna says, the important thing is to not lose sight of the fact that you are dealing with human beings, that every case, no matter how simplistic it might be on the one hand, or how complex and horrendous it might be on the other hand, is a case in and of itself involving human beings, their families, their feelings, their thoughts, their lives, and what their futures might have been.
That's brilliant answer from both of you. Have you ever found a case? I'm deviating from my my format here because I want to know if you've had a case ever that has outraged you or affected you in such a way that it took you quite a while to forget about the issues.
Well, sure. There's a lot of cases that you don't forget about, not just because they're famous or involve celebrities, but because they're fascinating from a pathological standpoint. They were intellectually challenging. And then, of course, cases that remain with you are the cases of sheer, utter, mindless violence and brutality, especially when it involves a child, an innocent person, or sometimes an older person who was somewhat incapacitated or lived alone, and so on. Not to suggest for one moment that if you just kill somebody with one single gunshot or one stab wound or one blow to the head, that's okay. These aren't graded by Supreme Being or maybe even by the courts, but they're graded in a moral or ethical sense, and in terms of psychological impact, the emotional significance to you, they have those gradations. So those kinds of cases, you're reminded of how brutal human beings can be, and I often think that to a great extent, many of the things that we see with human beings are not really duplicated in the animal world.
Very true. Very true. How about you, Ms. Kaufmann? Have you got anything that's stuck with you?
Well, the big cases, and one of the things that makes Dr. Wecht and I good partners is that we obsess about 3 cases in particular that we will just never get over because there's just no justice, and we know the facts of the cases so well that we could recite them word by word, what's in the autopsy reports and all the investigation. But that would be the assassination of John Kennedy, our president, the assassination of his brother, Robert Kennedy, who was running for president, and the murder, the sex abuse and murder of Jean-Benet Ramsey, which was just a case with a million moving parts. And those cases, wherever we are, if somebody brings that up, we will just stop what we're doing and go talk to them and explain what maybe they don't know. Or we're always looking to speak to people who may have more info on it, because as far as we're concerned, those are not closed cases. They're open cases, and they're always intriguing to us. And I've seen Dr. Wecht walk down the street, and people would come over or go through an airport, and people would say something, and he would just stop and talk about many cases, but especially about these, because the level of intrigue and passion it gets under both of our claws, and we'll just never stop doing that. It's a lovely obsession.
Yeah, I would add a fourth. I agree with Dawna on her recollection of these three cases. Indeed, I'll just make one small correction semantically, so that Dawna knows, of course, the difference. With some of the listeners, when she says they're open cases, they are officially closed. JFK, RFK, they're closed. Well, for that matter, John Benet Ramsey is officially closed too. What Dawna means open is that there's no question when you get into the forensic scientific aspects and investigation analyses of these cases, they indeed are open. And I'll throw one more in, Dawna, that I'm sure you will agree with, that is troubling and disturbing, and involved multiple deaths, by the way, and that is the Hurricane Katrina Memorial Hospital deaths, which is also, quote, officially closed, unquote. And Don and I, in our book, published it and showed clearly that these people were done in, they were euthanized, that they were, if you want to be gracious, mercy killings. I can't even give them that title because they really weren't mercy killings. These people eventually probably would have died, but not necessarily the next day or the next week or the next month. They might have lived for years. And there, too, these deaths were passed over and knowingly manipulated because of the political, sociological milieu that existed in New Orleans following Hurricane Katrina. So, yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
These are cases that are very troubling. I just spoke on JFK again last night, the governmental meeting of a bunch of organizations, communities in our county. They wanted me to speak on this, and I touched upon three of them and so on. People are always fascinated. And when you give them the facts in succinct fashion, and I wasn't there to speak for hours, but when you talk about the single bullet theory in the John F. Kennedy case and show why the Warren Commission report is absurd, when you talk about the distance from which the fatal shot that killed Robert Kennedy was fired, 1 to 1.5 inches, and people sit there and look at you in total amazement and awe. When you talk about John Benet Ramsey and you explain why the blow to the head was inflicted when she was already dead or dying, and she was dead from a rope placed around her neck during the course of a sexual perversion game. And you talk about Memorial Hospital deaths, Hurricane Katrina, and you talk about the toxicological levels of drugs that clearly they could have been broken into 4 aliquots to kill 4 different people. That's how lethal the doses were. It's right there,
yeah.
And yet totally ignored. So when you lay those out, and people look at you and say, and then you explain that you're talking officially on the record. You're not making anything up. You're not exaggerating. There's no hyperbole. And they're all laid out, in fact, in wonderful books that Don and I have done and so on. They're there. And so these cases will remain troubling for both of us, and not the only people in the world, of course. But we remain. Every time I just think of these cases, I get upset. I really do. Not that I sit around and agonize. I'm busy as anything. I'm very, very busy. I just did my 86th autopsy for the year.
Wow.
Today. I'm already on pace of my 409 from last year, and consultations that come in from attorneys all over the country and occasionally from international. I have an outstanding possible invitation to go to Dubai and give a lecture there to the police officers and so on. So I have enough to do. But one should never forget an injustice. I don't mean to stand on a podium and be a preacher, but injustice, and when it involves a major figure, and when there was a deliberate cover-up, especially a governmental cover-up,
yes,
a governmental cover-up, and that's what we're talking about. Again, it's not. I'm not saying that you excuse something because you murder your neighbor and get away with it, and it's a cover-up. But when you have a cover-up from the highest officials in the country, such as we had with John F. K.,
yes,
from from major officials like with RFK, from significant county and state officials with John Benet Ramsey, from significant local and state officials with the Hurricane Katrina cases, as well as professional organizations and so on. Now that is bothersome, troublesome, it is despicable, it is deplorable, it is unacceptable, and it needs to be exposed. And regrettably, it is not sufficiently exposed because the government gets away with it. That's why they're the government, and we're just the peasants, we're just the peons.
Well, thank goodness we've got peons such as you two around, because you shed light on so many different things. I mean, apart from the fact that you look at these high-profile cases, you also show just how important forensic pathology is, and not just in the courtroom, but at the crime scene investigation and afterwards. Basically, from where I sit, it looks as though you're doing a wonderful job of educating the layperson, because a lot of what you do is very complex in nature to us, and there's a lot of things that are very complex in terms, scientific terms, that the average layperson may not understand. So one of the big questions that we had was, how much do you actually have to dumb down the details that you guys provide so that the average person can pick up what you're saying?
Well, I can answer that because Dr. Wecht is excellent about breaking it down, the medicalese, the legalese, for a jury. And that same talent comes when he talks to me about cases. When I first got involved with this, I did not know the difference between an aneurysm and an embolism.
Right.
But now I do. And but he puts it in plain language so that the reader or the juror can understand, or the reporter can understand, and that's a skill that he has, and that's what is the thing that makes him so unique among people who do what he does. And there are not many, by the way, medical examiners who are also lawyers. So he's just in a rarefied universe there.
Very true. Very true.
But what also
go ahead, Tanya.
We always seek justice, but things change. Cases do get reopened. There could be a confession or a new piece of evidence or DNA testing that's finally linked to somebody, and a case can all of a sudden loom up and come right back. At the same time, that same kind of testing can get somebody out of jail who's been in jail for many years and just needs a reinterpretation of the forensics involved. So even when we write our books, in fact, in one of the chapters that we talk about, as we finish the chapter, we left open a question, and now there's going to be a new trial for the defendant in that case because there was something that wasn't kosher, and Dr. Wecht kind of zeroed in on it, and there's going to be a new trial for this person. So, even when somebody is put behind bars, that could change. So everything can change. It's all, it's not set in stone. It's not black and white.
Exactly. Brilliant stuff. As you were going to say, Dr. Wecht?
No, I agree with what Dawna just said. And I think she stated it quite well.
Brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. I'm going to move on now and talk more specifically about final exams. It's 4 different cases. Each of the cases are quite different. Without giving too much away for readers, what in each of these cases made you choose these particular crimes for your book?
Well, can I just say this, and then Dr. Wecht can take over? The 4 cases, 2 are from Pennsylvania, 1 is from Florida, 1 is from New York. The one in New York is called The Willing Victim. It's about a self-help guru a Caucasian wealthy man who travels to Harlem to look for a poor black guy because he wants to be murdered. The defendant, the victim, asks a guy he never met to murder him. Why? Because he's broke, and he wants his family to get something like $18 million in insurance policies, and if he dies from jumping off a bridge or some other way, they won't collect. But if he gets some schnook to murder him, he can collect. They can collect. So that's a really odd case. The case in Florida is one that people will have heard about. It's Jessica Lunsford, who was the 9-year-old that it seems that all Florida was looking for back in 2005. She disappeared from the trailer where she lived with her parents, her father, and her grandparents. And the chapter is called "The Girl in the Pink Hat" because everyone remembers that little wanted poster, missing child, this beautiful, smiling little girl with a pink hat on.
Yes, yes.
And we go inside that case because investigators were really off the mark on that case. And we also talked about what happens after the defendant is on trial. What happened to the family members on that? It's a very odd case for that. And you may think you know a lot about that case, but believe me, there's so much more to be learned. And it's just fascinating stuff. A lot of times I say Dr. Wecht is the CSI and I'm the criminal mind. If you want to talk about two TV shows that we replicate in our daily work, because I like to get into what makes a killer do these things, and he talks about the physical manifestations in the body. Dr. Andrew Bagby, this one is called Hell Hath No Fury, was murdered, no surprise here, because it was clear who murdered him, his girlfriend, who was also a physician, and
it wasn't clear from the outset.
That murder was so horrific and weird that the people just can't get over this case. So I'll let Dr. Wecht talk about what the physical injuries were of these people.
Brilliant.
Well, no, Dawna's outlined them quite well. The case in New York is indeed, I guess one could say, perhaps unique. There can't have been too many cases like that. At the beginning, you can imagine when the defendant told them about this guy offering him money and a credit card to help him kill himself, so it would appear to be a murder in order to collect that huge amount of insurance that he had taken out for his family. You can imagine I wasn't there. The detectives must have looked at each other and smiled and said, "Boy, this is a new one." Well,
definitely.
At this point, I want to make it clear that is no longer an issue, and it was not an issue in the trial. They came to realize that it was true, but they still proceeded, saying that did not make any difference and so on. They did not allow me to demonstrate how this had been accomplished, with the defendant sitting in the passenger front seat holding the knife with the bottom of the handle against the steering wheel, the blade directed outward, and the driver, in this case, the man wishing to kill himself, plunged himself repeatedly into the knife. And so that is a fascinating case. The detectives, by the way, when they went to the home to tell the wife and two teenage kids that husband father had died in this horrible fashion, they got about as much emotional response as if you're told at the end of the program that your garbage can at home was tilted over in the driveway.
Wow.
Maybe less. So they did begin to get a little suspicious then, and so on. So this case, as Dawna said, is going to be reopened, a new trial, and we'll hope that a more fair-minded judge. The judge was very biased, and will result in a more fair verdict with this individual.
Yeah, we're not saying that he didn't do anything wrong. Of course he did, and he knows it, and he deserves to be.
Well, because you can't help somebody commit suicide. Don is right.
Yeah.
It's still a crime. There's no state in America that allows you to have somebody commit suicide, eliminating the 3 states that have right to die, but those are limited to physicians in very special circumstances.
Exactly.
She's quite right. Now, the case then in Georgia, to get into it, there's no question then about how they screwed up first, but then eventually they got the guy who was a neighbor and so on. But what was important there was to show that the little girl could have been saved, should have been saved, that she was alive when she was put into that makeshift casket and so on, and the things that should have been pursued subsequently in terms of the negligence of the police agencies, etc. The 2 cases that occurred in western Pennsylvania, both in counties just outside my Allegheny County, in which the city of Pittsburgh is located, where I reside. The one case, it was the woman, she was a doctor too, and she traveled all the way from the Midwest to kill her former lover, who was the father of her to-be-born child, and she might have gotten away with it. Who knows? Except was it Dawna? Was it her hand machine, her phone, or a credit card, or something like that?
Right.
Showed that
tracking
she was
of her GPS.
En route, and she escaped to. Was it Newfoundland or?
Yes, she fled to. She was a Canadian citizen, so she fled to Canada, and they protected her.
Yeah, with the child who had been born, and then when the paternal grandparents, the parents of the decedent physician, Dr. Bagby, attempted to get involved and so on, what ensued thereafter with the woman and the child is just fantastic, and we'll leave that for the readers. The other case with the dentist is, Donna says, without any exaggeration, what a lovely man, and an ugly divorce situation. And literally in less than 24 hours, the final document was to be signed, and he winds up brutally murdered, stabbed repeatedly, and then ultimately with his head pushed through the glass windows, the doors that have little paneled glasses on each side of them, and so on, as he was struggling and rushing to get to the door to escape from his assailant. His head was pushed through there and almost completely severed. It was almost a kind of a physical guillotine. And I went to the scene and worked things out and so on. And it became pretty apparent who the culprit was.
Yes.
And that's what makes the chapter so fascinating, because the state police, they knew very quickly that it was most probably one of their own who was living with the estranged wife.
Yes.
They were living together, and so it took some time before that came to play. And another fascinating aspect of the case is the DNA. Some very special, highly sophisticated, brand new DNA analytical procedures were introduced. A colleague of mine, he's a doctor, PhD, specializing in DNA testing and so on, he testified too. So that case has its own very special points of fascination and technical, forensic, scientific interest. I think that it's a nice collection, different cases, and as you were talking before, Michael, about people learning from all of this and so on. Indeed, not that Don and I mean, that's not our. I mean, we're delighted, and I think that certainly is one of our objectives. I'm not suggesting it's the principal one or the sole one, but to know that we help to educate people, to make people more interested and aware of forensic science. It's a nice tangential or ancillary component of what we hope to achieve with these books. I certainly we're not doing them because they're putting us on easy street financially. Not that there would be anything unethical, immoral, or improper about that. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished.
Yes.
But maybe we'll achieve that. But in any event, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of interest, and it's something that we continue to do. As Dawna said, we'll have another book coming out this year, and I've got a whole bunch of cases, some of which I don't even think I've shared yet in detail, at least with Dawna. So there is a constant array. There is a never-ending pool of cases to be written about that people don't hear about. Obviously, most people, I understand, they want to hear about celebrities. They want to hear about cases that become famous.
Right.
John Benet Ramsey, Lacey Peterson. These are people who were not famous to begin with. They became famous by virtue of, the news media being turned on to them for whatever
right.
reason. But these other cases, even though they may not involve an O.J. Simpson or an Anna Nicole Smith or a Michael Jackson or a Phil Spector, they are very fascinating. I mean, who knew Chandra Levy right before that case first? Isn't that fascinating? Who knew Jeffrey McDonald before that case? Who knew Sonny Von Billo before her case?
Exactly.
You don't always have an Elvis Presley or Marilyn Monroe, but you can always have a forensic scientific puzzle and a fascinating story to tell.
Agreed.
Well, it is the puzzle too, and that's what we really promote as we're writing. We are mindful of how the storytelling is affecting the reader to keep turning those pages and to reveal, these astounding twists and turns that are just completely real, but surreal at the same time.
Agreed. I read the book and literally couldn't stop reading it until I had finished the entire thing. I did not want to put it down just because each case was, as you've described, very different, very unique, and mind-boggling in a lot of instances, and very tragic as well, heartrending. Most definitely. I do know you guys, moving on, you are working on another book. I'm guessing, will that be another Ann Rule Presents book, or is this going to be under a different umbrella?
Yes, this will be another Ann Rule Presents book. Let me just say, if I may, about Ann Rule. She is the empress of true crime. She has something like 33 #1 best-selling New York Times books. Everything she writes goes to the top of the bestseller list.
Yes.
And I've been a friend of hers for the last 15 years, and Dr. Wecht as well. And so her family put together this planetandrule.com so that they could promote all of her books that had gone out of print and bring them back to the world as an e-book. And if you don't have a Kindle or a Nook, you can download a free one and then buy the book, and it will download into your laptop, your computer, your reader, your cell phone. And that's what an e-book is. It's what most people are reading with these days. With Final Exams, we were the first duo to work under her umbrella, and so she's also graciously agreed to do our next book, which is on the Kennedy assassination, John Kennedy assassination. That'll come out later this year. But with Final Exams, it was so popular, and yet so many people said, gee, I'd like to have a copy that you could sign, So they are going ahead and doing a final exams print on demand run, and we're going to have a paperback book come out of that as well. So if you don't have a reader and you don't know what an ebook is or care, hang in there, because in a few weeks, I'd say maybe within a month, we're going to have a print version of that, and you can either download it or order it at planetandrule.com, and as well as finding out about Anne's latest books. And the people there that I have to tip my hat to, Planet and Rule is her daughter Leslie, Debbie, Glenn, Jake. These are such professional people. They do the artwork, they do the promotions, they do the website. If you go to facebook.com/planetandrule, you will see this interview eventually, but
Yes.
you'll see all the other ones that Anne does and that we do, and it's quite an operation that they have there.
That's brilliant. Dr. Wecht, anything to add to that?
Well, no, I just want to emphasize the fact that I think it's my understanding, and these people are very responsible. They fulfill their commitments. That in I think no more than a month, and quite possibly less, that book, Final Exams, will be available. So I urge people who are interested in these cases to keep that in mind. The other books that, by the way, we've been talking about, going back, some that I worked on before I collaborated with Dawna, Cause of Death and Grave Secrets and Who Killed John Benet Ramsey, and then Tales from the Morgue and Mortal Evidence, and then the books I've done with Dawna, Question of Murder, and what's our other book?
From Crime Scene to
From Crime Scene to Courtroom.
From
Yes.
Crime Scene to Courtroom, and now finally, these other books, I guess people will get them wherever they get them, Amazon or whatever. But
Amazon.com. All of our books, or just put in Dr. Wecht's name, and you'll find them. But Final Exams is available now in an ebook form.
In ebook, yeah, right. And a lot of people indeed do that, and the ones who aren't into that, Kindle and Nook, hold on for a month, but make a little note on the side of your desk to call your bookstore or check with planetandrule.com, as Dawna has said, in a few weeks, and find out when it becomes available.
Brilliant. And I will try and make sure I remind people of that on a regular basis, because having read the book and read other books that you two have written, it was brilliant, and one that anyone with this sort of interest would really, really enjoy reading, because it's very thought-provoking. And I just ask that please, when you do your next book, when you finish working on your latest collaboration, to please let us have a chat with you again.
Oh,
Well,
it'd
you
be
can
our
be sure
great
of that.
pleasure.
You
You can't imagine how exciting it is to have Dr. Wecht talk about the Kennedy assassination. And this book is going to be quite a stunning achievement of his 50 years of involvement in this case. And so, yeah, it's well worth waiting for.
Most definitely. I'm quite looking forward to it. I'd like to say it concludes the interview with both of you wonderfully fascinating people. And that your latest book, Anne Rule Presents Final Exams, is out now in ebook, and that a print version will be available in about a month's time. We will try and make sure we remind people of this. And we're very honored. The Guardian Liberty Voice is very honored and pleased to have had a chance to have spoken to both you very talented and brilliant individuals. Thank you both for taking the time to have a chat.
Thank you, Michael. Been most gracious of you to have invited us to spend all this time, and we deeply appreciate your interest and your excellent hosting, your wonderful questions to bring out all of these fascinating facets of forensic science. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hopefully I will have a chance to interview you both again in the near future. This has been absolutely wonderful, and I will probably come down off Cloud 9 about, tomorrow, I think, for having a chance to do this interview. This has been very exciting for me, and hopefully will be very exciting for our readers as well.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Guardian Liberty Voice.
No problem. No problem at all.
Okay.
Thank you.